U.S. announces new federal limits on forever chemicals in drinking water. We'll have more on the steps water providers will have to take in order to meet those new standards. Plus, the Biden administration is taking steps to restore wildlife protections for endangered plants and animals in the U.S. But some industry groups are pushing back. We'll tell you why. And the month of March sets a new record for global heat. We have a look at the numbers and what scientists say could be causing the thermometer to spike. The U.S. is cracking down on the amount of forever chemicals found in tap water. The Environmental Protection Agency recently finalized the first drinking water limit on toxic PFAS, which are a broad family of chemical substances. EPA officials say the strict new policy will require utilities to reduce the harmful compounds to the lowest level that can be reliably measured. The new limits will reduce exposure for 100 million people, helping to prevent thousands of illnesses. Speaking about the new rule, EPA Administrator Michael Regan said, quote, "The result is a comprehensive and life-changing rule, one that will improve the health and vitality of so many communities across our country." Scientists say that PFAS chemicals are harmful because they don't break down in the environment, and they are linked to serious health issues like certain cancers. Health advocates are cheering the Environmental Protection Agency over its recent move to finalize the policy. But water utilities took issue with the rule, saying treatment systems are expensive to install and that customers will end up paying more for water. EPA officials said water providers would have 3 years to perform tests on the quality of their water. If those tests exceed the limits, they'll have 2 more years to install new treatment systems. Joining us now to discuss is former Chief of Staff at the Environmental Protection Agency, Mandy Gunasakara. Mandy, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, great to be with you.
First off, can you explain for us what a forever chemical is and where do they come from?
Yeah, well, these are synthetic chemicals. So they're created as a byproduct of various industrial combustion. And it's used in everyday appliances and applications, mostly for water resistance material or for nonstick applications. So they're in pots and pans, they're on carpets, on walls. And so the chemical, when it was discovered, it solved a lot of everyday problems.
So PFAS are in our everyday lives, they're in our homes, but how do they end up in our drinking water?
So when the chemicals themselves don't break down, but the things that they are bonded to do. So let's say if you've ever had a nonstick pan and you're scraping it and eventually a piece of that bottom area, the bonded area, it breaks off, well, then that gets into the drinking water and those bits and pieces break down. So PFAS has been around since the 1940s. So you think about the conglomeration of those everyday uses in households, and then you just rinse it off and you wash it down the drain. So that's one way. Also through industrial uses, through the application, it's released through the emissions. It gets in the air, and when it's in the air, it eventually falls down, gets into the soil. And then when it rains, the PFAS that's present in the soil trickles down into drinking water. And you aptly call it the forever chemical. What made it really great for solving industrial problems makes it a problem once it gets released into the environment. It doesn't break down. So it's resilient from an industrial application, but it becomes a problem when this synthetic chemical doesn't actually break down and degrade once released into the environment.
Can you tell us a little bit about these new limits that the Environmental Protection Agency just put on PFAS?
Yeah, so they set a water standard essentially that limits the amount of PFAS that can be detected to 4 parts per trillion. And so ultimately what that means is if you have levels of PFAS in water systems that are above that, your entity, and it's mostly utilities, there is a multi-year, I think it's 4 to 6 years compliance path. The hardest thing with EPA is getting the balance right. Nobody wants PFAS in the environment. We know it's a problem. We want to get it out. like there is a cost element and going to be a challenge for certain areas to implement the type of technologies that are available to get PFAS out of the water systems. Rural citizens, they're going to see an uptick in their water bill because of PFAS requirements that do a good thing but come at a high cost.
There were some water utility companies who weren't so happy with this rule being passed. They said it's going to be incredibly expensive to them to be able to purchase this infrastructure, and it could end up being very expensive for the customer who's trying to get this clean water. Are there any ways right now that we are able to combat the cost falling back on the customer who lives in small town America who's going to be footing the bill?
Yeah, and this is where obviously Congress has appropriated a lot of additional funds to EPA. You've seen a massive uptick. If I were there calling the shots, I would make sure that a lot of these extra funds go towards helping these small rural, it's not just rural, it's metropolitan areas where they just don't have a great financial system put in place. I would divert a lot of those resources to go to supporting the areas that need support for implementing this latest, greatest technology that comes with a very real cost.
Mandy Gunasekara, great insights. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
The Biden administration finalized rules in the Endangered Species Act that restore protections for endangered plants and animals that were relaxed during the Trump administration. These rules say that decisions regarding species protection must be made without considering economic factors. The finalized rules are expected to face some criticism from Republicans, industry groups, and certain states. It has already received mixed responses from many, saying that although they support the conservation goals of the Endangered Species Act, the law adds unnecessary restrictions on development and creates regulatory uncertainty. Critics argue that these protections restrict economic activities like farming, ranching, mining, and oil and gas operations, impacting livelihoods and economic development. Environmental groups, including the National Wildlife Federation, are happy with this new law, but are disappointed that some provisions remain unchanged, emphasizing the need for stronger protections, especially for critical habitats. In other wildlife news, the federal government is planning to kill 500,000 owls along the West Coast. It's granting hunters the freedom to go after the invasive barred owl, which competes with the threatened northern spotted owl for habitat and food. According to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, spotted owl numbers have plummeted by about 75% over the last 2 decades, while barred owls seem to be thriving. This proposal has upset dozens of animal rights groups who say the plan is reckless, saying killing barred owls is not the answer. Instead, they advocate for non-lethal means to protect the spotted owls, such as safeguarding their habitat. A representative with the Environmental Protection Information Center said if nothing is done to control the barred owls, the northern spotted owl will go extinct in our lifetime. It's a cicada apocalypse. We are talking billions of these bugs, as 2 different types of cicadas will swarm across the U.S. for the first time since 1803. The last time these 2 species of cicadas shared the skies was when Thomas Jefferson was president, and it probably won't happen again until 2244. This event is rare because these 2 types emerge on different cycles, only co-emerging every 221 years. And despite the term cicada apocalypse, the 2 kinds only overlap in a small area of Illinois and sometimes in Indiana. Now, while cicadas can make a whole lot of noise, the Environmental Protection Agency says there's no reason to be alarmed about them, since they're not harmful to humans, pets, household gardens, or crops. Cicadas even serve as a valuable food source for birds and mammals, and they aerate lawns and improve water filtration into the ground while they add nutrients to the soil as they decompose. But that sounds pretty gross if their decomposing bodies are added to your water. Endangered small-toothed sawfish are performing a weird spinning behavior, and they're dying in unusual numbers in Florida waters. This caused leading federal and state wildlife agencies to launch an effort to rescue and rehabilitate the aquatic species, and to figure out why this is happening. Experts have not been able to figure out the cause for the behavior or the deaths, but water testing is ongoing. In the meantime, NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and several partners are working in the Florida Keys to rescue and rehabilitate sawfish affected by the event. Rescued sawfish will be taken to quarantine facilities for observation. Now a tip line and an email address have been set up for the public to report dead or distressed sawfish. Turning now to international news, Ethiopia announces plans to ban gas-powered cars. The African nation confirmed the blockade earlier this year, with the country's Minister for Transport and Logistics saying, quote, "A decision has been made that automobiles cannot enter Ethiopia unless they are electric ones." Officials say the resolution serves as a win for the nation's environmental impact and economy. However, critics are raising concerns over the high costs associated with buying EVs, plus the lack of charging infrastructure. The scrutiny comes as data from the World Bank reveals that little more than half of people in Ethiopia have access to electricity. The Minister for Transport and Logistics said addressing the latter point remained a high priority. The month of March came in hot, literally. According to the European Climate Agency Copernicus, March 2024 was the 10th straight month to set a new record for global heat, both in terms of air and ocean surface temperatures. The agency found the global average temperature was 57.9 degrees Fahrenheit, the highest ever for the month, and exceeding the previous record from 2016 by 1/10 of a degree. The report also found that March saw a global average sea surface temperature of almost 70 degrees Fahrenheit, which was the highest monthly temperature on record. Scientists also said higher than normal temperatures could partly be attributed to the El Niño weather pattern. Jennifer Francis, a scientist with the Woodwell Climate Research Center, said that with El Niño waning, these temperatures should go back down. However, she said that man-made global warming was also likely a contributor to the high temperatures, and added, quote, "The trajectory will not change until concentrations of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere stop rising." Coming up, scientists make an announcement about the world's coral reefs. Stay tuned. That story is just ahead on EarthX News.
Significant severe coral bleaching has been reported in at least 54 countries and territories around the globe since February 2023. So it's spatially extensive, occurring, again, in all ocean basins across multiple countries. NOAA is declaring that the world is indeed, in fact, experiencing its fourth global coral bleaching event.
It is unfortunately official. Scientists from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and the International Coral Reef Initiative have formally announced wide swaths of tropical reefs have started to expel the colorful algae living in their tissue. The joint statement comes just weeks after NOAA issued a dire warning about the risk of a mass coral bleaching event following months of record-breaking ocean heat and documenting extensive bleaching-level heat stress on reefs across the Atlantic, Pacific, and Indian Oceans. Joining us now is the man you just heard from, the coordinator of NOAA's Coral Reef Watch, Derek Manzello. Derek, thank you so much for coming on. So, for those who might not be familiar with the term coral bleaching, what exactly is it and what causes it?
So corals are an animal very similar to a jellyfish or something like that. They're very simple animals. They're only about 4 cell layers thick, but they live in a symbiotic relationship with a type of algae, and this algae provides upwards of 95% of the nutritional requirements of the coral animal. However, this symbiotic relationship is highly sensitive to elevated temperatures. And this is because photosynthesis essentially goes haywire in the algae at high temperatures and high light, causing the coral animal to expel these symbionts. So when they expel their symbionts, they turn stark bone white, and they just have the coral tissue and no algae. And essentially what this means is that the coral is in a state of starvation. So if water temperatures don't decline and things don't cool off quick enough, the coral may eventually die from this bleach condition.
So this is now the 4th worldwide mass bleaching event. When was the last one, and why is this so significant?
So there have been 3 previous global coral bleaching events on record. The first was 1998, the second was 2010, and the third was from 2014 to 2017. So this is the second global scale mass coral bleaching event we've experienced in the last 10 years. And the coral reefs are significant for multiple reasons. So one of the big things they do is they provide coastal protection from storms. Now, healthy coral reefs can block more than 90% of the wave energy during things like hurricanes, typhoons, and cyclones. Coral reefs are also the rainforests of the sea. Now, what that means is about 25% of every living thing in the ocean depends on coral reefs at some point in its lifetime. So what that means is 1 in 4 of every organism that's alive in the ocean is dependent on functional, healthy coral reefs.
So how does weather play a role in this? I assume that El Nino and La Nina both play a part, but what exactly is it?
So El Nino definitely plays a part. Now, the first mass coral bleaching event that ever occurred on record due to elevated ocean temperatures happened actually 40 years ago now. So this occurred throughout the Eastern Tropical Pacific over 1982, 1983. Now, that was, at that time, the strongest El Nino on record. Now, of course, we've broken that record now 2 times since. Now, the reason this is so severe and that these mass coral bleaching events are happening more frequently is because the ocean is warming significantly and rapidly, and it's outpacing the ability of corals to keep track with these rising ocean temperatures.
Is there any hope? Can coral reefs rebound?
Absolutely. So there's absolutely hope. One of the things I want to make clear is that all is not lost, right? This should be viewed as a global warning. The fact that we're seeing this synchronous bleaching happening in all 3 ocean basins, I mean, it's so severe you can see coral bleaching from satellites, right? So if temperatures cool off quickly enough, corals can recover and they can rebound. Now, the issue is coral bleaching events are becoming more severe and they're becoming more frequent. So even in the best case circumstance, it can take a reef maybe 7 to 15 years to start recovering coral from upstream sources. Coral larvae come in from other reefs. Now, the issue is we're seeing bleaching events happen with much greater frequency than 7 to 15 years. So what this means is that reefs are now entering a state of chronic stress. And this is why it's so important that we continue to engage in this assisted evolution process using cutting edge science and restoration to try to breed corals that have higher heat tolerance that we can then utilize to restore places that have been impacted, like the Florida Keys.
Derek Manzello, thank you so much for coming on and for sharing your knowledge with us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Coming up, a restoration project aims to enrich the ecosystem of the Tees River in the UK. Stay tuned. We have more on that story when EarthX News returns. Conservationists in the UK are praising an underwater plant for its ability to absorb pollutants from the water. And now an effort is underway to restore it in the Tees River, as volunteers hope the plant will improve the habitat and water quality of the body of water on England's northeastern coast. Leonardo Feldman has more.
The United Kingdom is planting seagrass meadow in an effort to combat climate change. The Tees River Trust says this project will benefit not only the species living in the area, but also it will help clean out pollutants from the water.
A meadow seagrass can provide habitat for all sorts of species of small fish, marine invertebrates. It can actually work towards improving water quality and maybe also in keeping carbon locked into the sediment rather than releasing it into the marine environment.
It is worth noting that the seagrass will first be grown onshore in tanks with seawater, given that the survival rate is a lot better that way rather than planting the seeds already in the location where they'll eventually be.
The idea is we'll keep half here at the terrestrial nursery, but the other half will go out into the estuary later in the summer, so that then becomes that self-sustaining meadow.
The same group is also working on another project. They plan on reintroducing oysters to the estuary.
And in this location, we've got 17 baskets, so about 600, just under, oysters in this area. A single oyster can filter up to 200 litres of water a day. So if you get them in enough volume, they can actually clear up the water in your local area, which means more light for plants such as seagrass to flourish.
For EarthX, I'm Leonardo Feldman.
Leonardo Feldman, thank you. A new baby giraffe was spotted enjoying the outdoors at a zoo in England. Officials at the Chester Zoo recently shared this footage of the calf named Edie roaming outside in her habitat for the first time since she was born. Zoo officials say the little one already stands over 6 feet tall and weighs about 220 pounds. Staffers there say there are only approximately 2,500 Rothschild's giraffes left in the wild. And the zoo works with the Giraffe Conservation Foundation and Ugandan Wildlife Authority to help protect them. And before we leave you, a gorilla at the Berlin Zoo is celebrating a big birthday. Fatu, a female western lowland gorilla living at the zoo since the late 50s, recently turned 67. To mark the special occasion, zookeepers prepared a basket of fruit, which included goodies like strawberries. Wildlife officials at the zoo say this is a special treat because fruit contains too much sugar for the primates, so they are usually kept on a vegetable diet. Scientists say in the wild, gorillas can live between 35 and 40 years, which leads some people, including the zoo's veterinarian, to believe Fatu may likely be the oldest gorilla alive.
So there's no gorilla in the world that has reached such an advanced age. We know for sure from gorillas kept in zoos, and we have to assume that in the wild, where the animals never reach such an old age as they do in zoos, that there is no animal older than her. We are therefore proud to say that this is the oldest gorilla in the world.
Western lowland gorillas usually live in a group of several female gorillas and one male gorilla, or the silverback. But at the zoo, Fatu has her own private enclosure. Not to worry though, she can have contact with her fellow gorillas anytime she wants. That's it for this edition of EarthX News. Please join us again next week. I'm Christina Thompson.